Hey guys, so you know that I love shooting with a tilt shift lens. I've been using the Canon 24mm tilt shift version 2. I love this lens. I did a whole video about it, about using tilt shift lenses, how they work, what the effects are. So I'll put a link to it here, I'll put a link to it at the end. Definitely check that out because that goes into detail with some really cool real-time examples of exactly how the effect works with a tilt shift lens. But I love using this lens, and when I take it out, people ask me, what it does, why I use it, and I'll explain it, and then they'll say, well, can't you just do that in editing afterwards? Can't you just do that in Photoshop? And my answer is always, well, yeah, but it's not the same. But, I don't know. Is it the same? It might be the same. It might be better to do it in Photoshop. I really don't know. I've never really tried it out. So that's what I want to do. I want to take this out today, get some shots with it using the effects that this can do, the shifting and the tilting in lens, and then get the same shots without any of those effects and see if I can replicate those in Photoshop and in Lightroom afterwards and see which one's better. I may be getting it wrong. I may have been doing it wrong all these years. Maybe it's just easier to do it in the computer afterwards. So I'm going to do this in a couple of parts. The first part is going to be the shifting, and the second part is going to be the tilting, and we'll do comparisons in the computer afterwards. If you're from the Long Island area, you could probably already tell where I am. I'm at Mitchell Field in Garden City. For you history buffs, Mitchell Field was used as an air base for the Army going back probably a century ago. Really had a lot of use during World War II. This building behind me is Maintenance Hangar 5. It's just currently used as storage and maintenance for the Aviation Museum, which is a few buildings down. This is Museum Row in Garden City. There's a carousel there, there's a firefighter museum there, and there's a Cradle of Aviation Museum there. There's Hangar 5, and there's the Children's Museum, which was Hangar 6 prior to that. So this served as the air defense for New York City during World War II. So that's your little history lesson there. So let's get to some shooting and do some comparisons. Let me turn you around so you can see what I'm doing while I do it. So basically the first shot I'm going to take is what I would normally do, which is going to be shooting this building here and using the shift to shift my image circle up so that when I shoot this, normally I have to look up. I have to point the camera up like this to get the shot. But instead of doing that with the tilt shift lens, I'm going to shift it up. You can see the front of the lens goes up, but the camera stays level to the ground. So I use the level through the viewfinder to make sure that the camera is level, and then I can shift the whole lens up to move the image circle up so that the building basically stays architecturally sound. So I'm going to get this first shot here. I'm shooting at f4, and again, normally I would do this on a tripod, but I can eyeball it using the electronic level inside, and I'll shift this up, and now I have a nice level shot with nice parallel lines. So there's that shot shifted up a little bit. So if I didn't have a tilt shift lens, what would I be doing here? Well, I'd be, like I said, pointing the camera up just a little bit. So I'm going to point the camera up a little bit and get the same shot. So there's that same shot, just with the camera pointed up a little bit. But what's going to happen there is I'm going to, in cropping, I already know in cropping in Lightroom, I'm going to lose some of the image when I crop, because it's basically distorting the entire image. I'm going to lose some in cropping. So I know when I do shots like this, I know that I'm going to have to leave a little bit of meat on either end in order to make sure that I can actually, after cropping, get the same image that I wanted to get. So what I'll do when I can is I'll take, a bunch of steps back. I'll go way back over there and get the same shot, leaving probably about 25% on either end. Let me go do that. I'll get this shot. Now, a couple of things. Maybe you can't back up. Maybe there's a wall or a river behind you and you can't go further back. There happens to also be this sign in the shot, which now is in my shot. So instead of backing up, if I can't back up, what if I just went wider? So let me put the 15mm lens on here and get the same shot using the wider angle and see if I can actually replicate this with that also. All right, so I have the 15 to 35 on here. I'm going to shoot it at, let's say 15. That ugly sign out of the picture. I'm gonna actually shoot it at 20 millimeters. That should give me enough. And then what I'm also gonna do is I'm gonna go to 15 millimeters and I'm gonna shoot this shot level so that I don't have any converging lines. I don't have any distortion with the lens. All my lines will be nice and parallel. And basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put the hanger in the top half of the image. I'm gonna keep my camera level. Basically I have the entire hanger in here and I have a lot of street and broken pavement. But basically what I want to do is I want to see if I can basically do this and just crop this later on. It's basically the same thing. It should be the same thing or something very similar to what I'm doing when I shift the 24 millimeter lens up, in that I'm just using the top part of the larger image circle. So I'm going to get this shot. This should be fairly level. Again, I normally do this on a tripod, and then I'll crop that and compare that to the 24 millimeter image shifted up, just to see if I can maybe just use a wider lens instead and crop afterwards. So we'll check that out. So I'm going to head over to the computer, we'll take a look at those, and then after that we'll continue with part two. Part two being the version where we do the tilting, which is a whole different effect. It's going to give me a whole different set of challenges to try to replicate that in the computer, but we'll try that also. So let's jump into the computer and take a look at that. Okay, so I've loaded all the shots into the computer. Let's jump into Lightroom. We're going to do this in Lightroom because it's pretty easy to do there. There's a couple of different ways to do it, which we'll go through, but let's jump into Lightroom and take a look. So this first shot here is the one that I used the tilt shift lens for shifted. You can see it's basically everything is nice and straight the way you want it to be. And just take a look at the cropping here as far as how wide this image is and exactly where it cuts off. But this is the shot that we want to try to replicate and get the same with the editing. So this next shot here was the shot with the 24 millimeter tilt shift lens, but not shifted, just basically pointed up. And you can see how the building kind of has that look where it's, the lines are converging and it kind of looks like it's falling over backward. So we want to try to correct this to get those lines nice and straight. So the way to do it basically is down near the bottom under transform, you have your vertical and horizontal. And I'll just do a quick slider here and show you. The horizontal is going to give you the left and right, and the vertical is going to give you the, the up and down. So you can kind of correct it. So a really quick, easy way to adjust this is to drag your vertical over to the left until it looks like things are nice and straight, right about there. But now you can see that you've got like a keystoning effect here, where now the image, you're not really going to be able to use the full image that you had taken because it's going to crop off at the bottom. So we're going to go into our crop tool and we're going to crop in order to get the most out of our image here. And we're going to take a look at this now compared to the original shot. See, you got nice straight lines, very quick, easy fix in Lightroom, nice straight lines. But now let's jump back to the original shot, which used the tilt shift lens shifted up. And you can see you've got a wider shot. You have more room on either end. Let me compare these two directly next to each other. The shot on the left was using the tilt shift lens shifted up, and the shot on the right was the one that we just edited to correct the lines to straighten everything out. And you can see there's not a lot cropped off, but there's enough off either end that if you really wanted that full wide shot, you're really not getting it now. You're losing some on either end. And just to take a quick look, if you zoom in, we're getting high quality images out of both shots. You're really not losing very much, if anything at all, by adjusting the image in Lightroom, which is the one on the right. You're basically getting the same shot. So the next option, which is what we did, is to either use a wider lens or back up. So this next shot here is the one where I was able to back up using the same lens, except I had some obvious obstacles in the way, this big sign right here. But we'll just take a real quick look, if that wasn't there, how we can fix these lines. Same thing, using the vertical transform, slide it over to the left, a quick crop. And now if these obstacles weren't there, by backing up, I'm actually able to get an even wider shot with all the correction done. Still a nice, very sharp image. No loss of image quality there at all. Just wish we didn't have this sign in the way here. So in that instance, obviously we couldn't back up and get this shot. What we would do instead is get closer where we were before and use a wider lens. So this was shot basically in the same spot as before, using a lens at 20 millimeters. And again, you can see I'm pointing the lens up, so you're getting those converging lines. The building kind of looks like it's falling backwards. So again, I'm going to use a real quick vertical transform. Drag this over to the left till it looks good, and I can be a lot more technical with this if I wanted to and make sure it's exactly straight, but I'm just eyeballing it for this. I can crop it, and even this is going to be significantly wider than the original shot corrected. So let me compare these two side by side. See, on the left is the original shot shifted up, on the right is the shot taken with 20 millimeters instead of 24 millimeters and adjusted and cropped in Lightroom. And you can see how much more you get. Now, if I wanted to get the exact same cropping, I can recrop that image on the right that I adjusted with the wider lens, and I'm getting the same image. Zoom in a little bit, and basically you're getting the exact same image in both situations. And then this last shot I took was at 15 millimeters with the lens kept level so that we didn't have any distortion, we didn't have any converging lines. And I just wanted to see if we can crop this to make this look like the original image. No loss of quality there, and let's just compare that to the original. And basically I'm getting what is essentially the same image using a wider lens. Obviously the one on the right is cropped, so it's gonna look a little bit smaller, but you're getting the same high quality image. Now, just as a quick note, I mentioned there was two ways to do this in Lightroom. The one easy way is using the transform vertical, and you can just kind of slide it back and forth. The other way is using the guided lines, which is a little bit more detailed and exact. You don't necessarily always need to do it that way. You're going to click on guided, and basically from there you can just follow these parallel lines and it corrects it for you. We'll go deeper into using the guided lines in another video, but that's just another way to do it that gets a little bit more exact. But I gotta say, overall, really no loss of quality, and I'm getting the same image using a non-shifted lens and adjusting it in Lightroom and cropping as I am using the shift feature of the tilt shift lens. So what does this mean? As long as you're able to recompose your image, like I said, use a wider lens to get a little bit more on either side or on the top or the bottom. As long as you're able to do that, or move back and get the same shot, or use a really wide lens and keep your lens level to begin with and crop afterwards, as long as you're able to back up a little bit to give yourself a little bit more breathing room, because you're gonna have to crop when you make the adjustments in Lightroom, as long as you can do that, you're really getting the same image with a non-shifted lens by editing in Lightroom than you are with the shifted lens. So I really think that feature, now there's other things that you can do with the shift that you can't maybe necessarily do in Lightroom, but for the most part, for 98% of my shooting with this lens, when I'm shifting it, I can actually use Lightroom instead, just make the adjustments in Lightroom and get the same image that I would have gotten using this tilt shift lens. So part one of this video series, tilt shift versus editing, I gotta say, is a draw. Either way, whether you're using Lightroom to edit the image afterwards, as long as you can get a wider shot, you're gonna be able to get the same results that you're getting out of a shifted lens, the tilt shift lens. So pretty cool to see that. I didn't know going in how this was gonna work out, if it was gonna be. I have a feeling that the tilting effect that we're gonna do in part two is gonna be a little bit more of a bigger difference between the two. I think we're going to see it that way, but for the shifting effect, really, you don't really need the tilt shift lens to get those nice even lines to kind of straighten out your architecture. You can just do it in editing, and Lightroom is great for that. Lightroom is really simple and easy for that stuff. So I found this pretty interesting. I hope you found this helpful. If you were thinking about using a tilt shift lens for things like this, for architecture type stuff, or you're using one now and you're wondering maybe I can just do this in the computer, I kind of hope that answers the question. I know it does for me. I know I don't necessarily need to be shifting in the field when I can just a quick and simple edit, especially using a big megapixel camera like the R5, which I was using for this, 45 or 50 megapixels, whatever it is. you have plenty of room to work with in the original image. So let us know if you have any questions or comments or anything, any successes or failures that you've had, tilt shift lenses shifting, if you have different experiences versus editing in Lightroom or in Photoshop, let us know in the comments below. We love to hear from you. Thanks a lot for watching. Look forward to part 2 of this series. See you next time.